Happy American Thanksgiving to all of my American friends and subscribers. I had a friend of mine from the States send me a happy text today with a picture of her turkey. I think she said he's 11 years old or 9 years old or something like that now, and he manages to escape the axe every year. He's a great big turkey. He's actually pretty nice looking. I'm not sure if I'd want to kill him either. I guess he does provide a good amount of entertainment around the farm, she says, so that's good. Anyway, a good time to be thankful, perhaps. What we will eat in 2030. This is just a little warm-up. I got another article that's sort of been circulating a little bit now that's older as well, but sort of talks about the dystopia a little bit. Apparently the writer doesn't support it, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So anyway, the future of our food is in a contested space. Oh, by the way, this was written 4 years ago. The future of food is a contested space with multiple competing ideas about how the future will evolve. The growing human population with a significantly increasing global middle class, which they are trying to destroy, will be the engine of increasing global demand. Historically, increasing wealth has led to changing consumption patterns, particularly more meat and other resource-intensive foods like cheese and eggs. The cultures that were able to procure this type of resource intensive food also managed to do better. Anyway, the question is the extent to which historical trends will play out in the future. This is for two prime reasons. First, on a global basis, more people are now of an unhealthy weight than a healthy weight. At the same time, the historical hunger challenge is slowly receding, while malnourishment is increasingly associated with excessive weight and obesity, creating a new challenge for food systems. This is creating a new policy interest in food for health, which has the potential to help shape diets and thus food systems. Second, the Paris Climate Agreement pledges to keep climate change to well below 2 degrees Celsius, given that food systems, growing food and feed, making and transporting food, cooking, eating, and throwing away food, accounts for just under a third of the greenhouse gas emissions made by humans, not the overall. Food alone has been potential to use up the entire Paris Agreement's carbon budget. As many people have written, the most potent way to decarbonize the food system is to reduce the amount of greenhouse intensive food we produce, notably meat. One of the reasons why this stuff ends up being so greenhouse intensive is because tractor has to grow the grain all year to feed the cattle. Of course, some free range happens, so that only is a percentage of it. Going to the slaughterhouse, going to the auction, going to the grocery store, people driving to the grocery store, to the auction, etc. to get it. So that's typically all the factors, or most of the factors that they are included in the production of meat. So the solution to that, in my opinion, is people need to just have maybe closer sources. I mean, they're already talking about breaking the world down into smaller or more cohesive pieces. Why wouldn't they just adjust for that? It might be a good time for people who have the opportunity to go and find a farmer and a butcher on their own to go and just do that. I don't think it would make any difference in the long run for what they want to do over the years, but if you were able to procure something like that for yourself and go in on it with a friend or another, or two families or something like that, you might be able to get access to more meat than they think you should be eating. Anyway, that's just some of my thoughts on how to avoid this if they do really try to push this through somehow, some way. Dietary advice suggests 500 grams per person per week is healthy meat consumption, 26 kilograms per year. As can be seen on average, we'd expect this globally, particularly in the rich world. Thus, on one hand, projections of demand are growing, but on the other hand, important policy drivers that may constrain demand growth or increase demand for sustainable nutrition is also growing. It is undoubtedly true that some areas of the world need access to radically more food, but equally other areas of the world are suffering from eating too much of the wrong sort of food and filling landfills with discarded food waste. So this is your inner city, United States, somewhat Canada too, where, and we've had this discussion with people on my channel, I've had it with other people, other places too, that there's sort of a food scarcity issue in certain parts of the cities in the United States and areas where people can't get to decent food, and so you can go get a bunch of cheap McDonald's and they put ridiculous sales on things, and you eat all this garbage. And so that's what this food is that they're talking about, and the discarded food waste is, mostly the packaging, is what they're talking about, really, which is all biodegradable anyway. But anyway, many commentators agree that we are likely to need a contract and converge model, or as Tim Lang, a professor of food policy at City University in London, has eloquently put it, the rich need to eat less and differently, so the poor can eat more and differently. Kind of a socialist mentality, lower the upper in order to raise the lower, instead of just trying to find a way to raise the lower. And in this case, a lot of the lower are going to be in places around the world where, instead of, say, developing water and agriculture for them, instead they just go and give them vaccinations for rare and interesting diseases, or test new vaccines on existing diseases, or sometimes just spread diseases through vaccines. So anyway, instead of helping them, a lot of this is just being used as an excuse as to how things are a certain way, and yet they don't actually help them, no matter how much money you give to UNICEF, etc. They don't ever seem to solve the problem in third world countries. Moving along, as well as uncertainty over how global demand will evolve, there is uncertainty about how production will evolve. Since the Green Revolution, the global focus has been to produce a relatively small handful of commodity crops: maize, wheat, rice, soy, palm oil, in ever larger quantities and ever greater technical efficiencies. This means that large-scale agriculture can produce calories very cheaply, and some of these calories aren't so good for you anyways. This is written 4 years ago. I don't know. I think it would have been before this. They would have been talking about it to some degree, about how the herbs are more resistant to the glyphosate, and so they've had to add more glyphosate to Roundup in order to kill the herbs off, and they've had to increase the resistance of the crop to the poison as well. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, out of thousands of years of eating grain, people are getting allergic to gluten left, right, and center. You have a gluten-free aisle in the shopping mart all of a sudden that never existed in your whole life before that. And it's not gluten intolerance, it's glyphosate sensitive. The tests have shown that rats gain high levels or high occurrences of stomach cancer. Monsanto had been banned in parts of Europe. I don't know if that's still the case. It's been years since I've looked at that kind of stuff, but that used to be the scale anyway. So, for many, food is cheaper than it has been relative to income, but this allows us both to eat and wait a lot and waste a lot. But however efficient big ag is, it creates significant environmental costs, particularly in eroding soil health, water quality, and reducing biodiversity. Actually, the soil health too, talking about glyphosate and Roundup, the eroding soil health is because of the excess amount of that too. It tends to kill the soil when it settles into it. And they don't just spray around, vegetation season. They also will do a spray on crops to help dry them out faster, just after they knock them down, or just before they knock them down, So they do add quite a bit of this stuff in big growing. It is more efficient. It's one of those games of balance. You can feed more people, but there's the offset is that it harms more people. So this is the kind of game of balance that they keep trying to play, and why some things maybe are benevolent and other things are just awful because they made a big mistake, and the only way to fix it is by doing drastic things that people know likey. Anyway, food loss and waste if it were its own country. So it kind of gives you a little bit of an order of some of the more wasteful countries and how much CO2 they produce, I guess. But anyway, one can imagine a different food system. If we lived in a world where demand was different, perhaps people wanted to eat healthy and sustainably, it is possible to imagine a much greater mix of big and small farms producing a larger range of produce, employing more people, and creating a more local and circular economy. So I'm okay with the way that all sounds. I've thought about that long before I knew who these idiots were. That something like that makes more sense. I see so much food that gets trucked all over the place instead of trying to diversify and set up more production facilities closer to people. Instead, we end up getting milk. I live in the West. Some of our milk ends up coming from Ontario, I believe. Like, it's kind of madness. I think another thing that would be good would be to have like multi-story greenhouses so that even in places like Canada we can use solar power to charge lights, utilize the sun during the day, and then continue growing throughout the night, and have controlled CO2 injection and all the things that they do in Holland, where they have these really amazing hydroponic setups where they can grow an amazing amount of food in a small space. So I mean, some of that stuff's okay. I'm not going to poo-poo everything these guys talk about. It's not possible. I mean, yes, there's a lot of horrific things coming because of the way they want things to change drastically, which is why they're getting all authoritarian on everybody. It's just too bad they couldn't have actually made these things happen prior to putting everyone in this strange, fearful panic with COVID-19 as the hinge point of opportunity to make this all happen. So, anyway. So, what might we eat in 2030? I think the demand will be shifting and more people will want to eat a healthy diet, one that is less intensive and wasteful of resources. The increasing emergence of localism, whole foods, organic, artisanal, and real food movements is a sign of this, at least for the rich and dedicated. And yet, I have access to land and I can grow enough food for myself, at least vegetative stuff for, the winter and perhaps part of the spring even. I grew a couple 100 pounds of potatoes this year, so that's tons. There's going to be extra. Some of it will be used for planting again next year. That's why I've told people in the channel before, and if you haven't heard it yet, if you live near farmers or people like with land, you should be trying to make deals with them so that you can utilize their land for a cheap amount of money and grow a bunch of your own food. It's super rewarding too, by the way. I never felt freer than when I planted my first seeds and then pulled the stuff out of the ground after it was done, or pulled it off the vine. It felt so good. It's like, this is what living is like, huh? This is how our ancestors did it. This is what you did when you didn't have money. You didn't need money, so it feels really good anyway. If you can get on it, anything that you can do to grow something even in your house, do it. It's super fun anyway. So what might we eat like in 2030? I think demand will be shifting, yada yada. So our diets may be more veg and fruit, whole grains and vegetarian food, or new alternatives, soya products. Stay away from that. It's full of estrogen. Or perhaps insects or artificial meat. How about no and no? That's not happening. I mean, you might be able to convince some people to do that. Fine. If you can interest people in it through whatever means you think necessary, have at it, but I will not partake. And less fried and sugary things. Well, I mean, whatever, that's a choice, but more people should probably stay away from that anyway. It's still a matter of choice. We'll still eat meat, but perhaps more like our parents and grandparents. See it as a treat to savor every few days. I guess that depends on whether or not your parents and grandparents were butchers or not, because I bet they ate meat every day. For the world's poor, Adam Drewonsky and others have shown the cost of a nutritious diet is so much greater than the cost of a calorie-dense one. It is therefore likely that commodity crops such as maize, wheat, sugar, and oil will continue to underpin the global food system, but will be processed in ways that are better for our health. This may include fortification or biofortification, where nutrients are engineered in, either in the biology or manufacture of food, and the significant reformulation of current foods for fewer calories and more nutrients. Ultra-processed foods need not be unhealthy. So it'd be interesting to get into some of the details on what all of that means. Sounds like just a lot of messing around, but anyway. Although there are signs of a pushback against globalization, you think. All I see is you getting ratioed on your own website and no one likes you. Its many benefits suggest that increasingly the historical divide between the developed and developing world will break down, and the issues for every country will be how to ensure access to culturally acceptable healthy diets that are affordable by the poor. This will involve both locally produced food and food traded from afar. Food systems are likely to diversify as markets simultaneously grow for local real food. And like I say, people should start thinking about just trying to get involved with any way that you can with being local already before they get their fucking hands on it. Take control of your own shit now. Anyway, as well as nutritious, convenient food. We won't have an organic world or a big ag world, we'll have both. But we must have better nutrition, less waste, and more sustainability. Otherwise, we simply stack up ever more problems for the future. And so a lot of these programs are actually already being pushed through the cities. And it's interesting to note that I have like the original book called, well, maybe not the original, there could be another one before this, but a book 10 years old that's called The Great Reset by Richard Florida. And a lot of that book talks about utilization of cities being more advanced and advancing life and life around it. And it's also where you'll find the cultural, how do you put it, the modern day beatniks, the hipsters, and a lot of them already by nature are, I shouldn't say by nature, by whoever created their cult, essentially. Playing with old video games, not new stuff. Wearing used clothes, not new stuff. Being really food conscious about not eating meat, actually, and various other things. My sister moved to the city with her job from where we live now, which is rural town style. And, you know, she's adopted all of this stuff. She eats by the vegetarian diet given by the Canadian food standards, how you should eat and stuff. So a lot of this stuff is happening in cities, and a lot of it's programmed and designed for cities. I would suggest that the propaganda comes from every angle, from people like this down as to how people should dress, think about their lives. They put it in the magazines for the hip and the trendy in the cities, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, to finish this off, we'll just watch this video quick, and then we'll end this so that we're not dwelling on this for too long. But, yeah. That person definitely died of COVID. It's interesting how they word things. Most people will want to eat. Like, how do you know? Because they're planning it, putting it in people's heads. Nope. They tell you nothing, as always, you know. Oh, we'll just add stuff to make maize and corn healthier. A girl watering. Water. Oh, boy, yeah, it's too bad they weren't more transparent with some of this stuff. It's probably because they know they'd have another, you know, Monsanto pushback like they had years and years ago. So anyway, that's 4 years old. That's still the direction we're heading. None of this stuff's new. Yada, yada. Again, happy Thanksgiving. Be thankful that it's not 2030, because God knows what that'll look like by then, if we even get that far. And I hope everyone had a good one and ignored as many rules as possible and enjoyed your family. And yeah, that's the better thing to do. That's why shout out to Howard, do something. He's absolutely right. How are they going to police this? Well, they can't right now. The only thing they can do is try to scare you with big fines. Actually find a couple people, put it in the news, and try to scare your ass. But right now they don't have any full control over it. However, the only thing that I would say is, depending on where you live and what your neighbors are like, that could be a problem, because there's going to be rats everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but they'll be around. So anyway, that's, I guess, up to your discretion. But anyway, yada yada. Thanks for watching. I got another one coming up right away here too, that was an older video that's kind of relevant to all this. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Another one should be popping up in a few minutes. All right, peace.